Please welcome Alex Fine, CEO at Fun.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Fine. I am the CEO of Fun, and today we are going to discuss making payments fun, the evolution of global payment rails. I'm going to break today's conversation into a few parts. I'm going to give a quick introduction into us. We're going to go over a user story. This is on-the-ground customers we've spoken to and some of the things we learned and the broader patterns that came from that. A little bit of a technical deep dive into how we solve the problems these users face, and then a quick conclusion. There we go. Fun introduced a new payment category that really couldn't have existed more than 12 months ago. We call that category deposit. What is deposit? We are the highest converting deposit flow for global fintech applications. We exist because there is a deceiving amount of complexity in onboarding global users. Those users experience fragmentation in two places. They experience fiat fragmentation, onboarding currencies, onboarding dozens of different currencies, and they experience crypto fragmentation. Hundreds of different assets are trying to onboard to a stablecoin application, let's say. We work with prediction markets, savings applications, neobanks, online casinos, exchanges, and more. Any fintech application looking to onboard a global user base. Our most well-known customer is Polymarket. We power 100% of deposits on Polymarket. Now, recall, we created this category of deposits, and it's still very, very nascent. With that being said, we view this category as a canary, as an indicator for the broader growth of global fintechs. You really didn't have global fintechs up until the last 12 plus months. From launching about a year ago, we've grown from near zero to over 10 billion in process volume per year on our infrastructure. You can think of us analogous to Stripe. Stripe built payments for internet commerce. Fun is building payments for global fintech applications. Let's dive into a little bit of a story. We began collaborating with Polymarket ahead of the 2024 election. So it was August 2024, and Polymarket already had existing best-in-class infrastructure. Their team is very strong. They have a very strong product sense, very strong product team to help onboard users. So it's not like we were going into a product that wasn't in good shape. And before we started building, before we started engineering, we're like, well, we should probably talk to some users and understand some of the unique challenges faced by these customers when they're trying to onboard, and really have that in our mind when we went towards engineering. So today we're going to go through a few of those stories and some of the things that came out in those conversations. The first set of users we wanted to chat with were fiat customers. So we sat down with fiat customers, and if you think about how you normally onboard to a fintech application, think about onboarding to Robinhood. You're going to do an ACH pull, which means you're going to connect your Plaid account, and you're going to transfer funds in. But the best pull-based rails, and so pull is when the merchant initiates, push is when the user initiates. Basically, all fintech apps are pull-based rails. The best pull-based rails at the time were, I don't necessarily want to call it the vendors themselves, but these big on-ramp vendors where you put in your credit card and you get crypto out on the other side. We sat down with these customers, and we sat down with about 10 of them. So first of all, they couldn't use their bank account to link out. Then they were like, oh, I need my card. So they would have to go in another room, they grab their wallet, they grab their credit card, they enter their credit card. They enter in a whole bunch of KYC information. They answer a number of personal, often invasive questions. What addresses have you lived in the past? How much money have you made? Which of these people are you related to? And still, they would be magically blocked. It was unclear why they were being blocked, and for those who are in payments, a lot of it has to do with device telemetry, VPNs, things like that. So we chatted with 10, 12 of these different users. Of all the fiat users we talked to, 0 were able to successfully deposit onto the platform. Not like, oh, like 1 or 2 made it, or like 5, or like 0. None of them made it successfully. So these users weren't unique. We were like, okay, a whole bunch of these users have massive asset fragmentation. Users were coming up with funds in different places. They were coming from different regions. And And the fiat users were really struggling. So we're like, okay, let's go talk to some crypto customers. This is a crypto platform. I think we're going to be more successful with the crypto users. So we started with a user that had USDT on Binance. And USDT on Binance seems pretty innocuous. There are a lot of users with USDT on Binance. That is a very common source asset. And we looked at the required flow this customer had to go through in order to onboard funds from Binance into a global fintech app. They had to take that USDT, they had to transfer it to a wallet, they had to bridge it, they had to make sure they were bridging the gas token, they had to go to multiple different vendors just to bring the funds back to the platform they wanted to use, and throughout this entire process, it is full of all of these different gotchas and pitfalls. So you need to learn how to use wallets and keep keys safe. You need to learn how to bridge the actual gas token and understand how that works. Bridging can take a long time, and if you're not smart, there was one user we saw, we talked to a number of market makers as well. There's one user we saw who was trying to move in 400K on stables and lost 100 grand on stables as part of that transaction. So if you don't know what you're doing, it is very easy to lose a lot of money going through a lot of these flows. There are a lot of catches. Now, I said this is what the user should have done. This is the required flow to get funds in. But this is not what the user did. What the user did is they took their account address and they pasted it into Binance. And keep in mind, they're screen sharing during this flow, and we're asking them to really think out loud. So we're like, okay, whoa, you just pasted your address into Binance. What do you think you're about to do? Like, I'm sending funds to my Polymarket account. Like, what a silly question us as the interviewer is asking. Like, no, are you positive that's what you're doing? I'm like, yes, I'm positive. Like, okay, great. And we try not to be leading, but at this time, my team is looking at me knowing this user is about to lose their funds if they execute this transaction. And this was a $100 transaction, so we knew if the user lost their funds, we would refund them. But most users don't have someone on a call as they walk through the onboarding experience. So we're like, are you sure? They're like, yeah, I'm sure. So they click confirm. And then Binance puts up this big warning, and Binance is like, are you sure? Are you sure it's the right token on the right chain? And the user looks at it, they pause, like, can you think out loud? They're like, yeah, this is good, this is right. And they click confirm, and sure enough, the money goes into a black hole. The scariest part was that wasn't the only user who did that. Of the 10 to 12 customers we talked to, we saw 3 or 4 send money into a black hole during a live customer interview. And this was, again, this is state of the art. This was not a Polymarket problem. They had very clear instructions. They were definitely, I think, the best at onboarding customers before we started to work with them. And as we took a step back and we're kind of going through the collateral damage and we're thinking, okay, where do we really want to be focusing here? How do we want to be spending our time? We realized that the Polymarket, the challenge those users were facing was really more emblematic of a broader pattern, where no other fintech said, hey, day 0, we're just going to onboard everyone. Most fintechs start in a specific region. They have rails in that specific region. They don't need to manage these complexities. And while there was high friction at that time, these were really the unique payment challenges associated with a new wave of global fintech applications. To share a little bit on how Fun solves this problem and where we see the global payments market going, I break it into 3 parts. So first, we're going to start with crypto fragmentation. And we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on the technicals associated with solving crypto fragmentation in a second. But you need to have users who can send in USDT on Tron or Binance, users who can send in Bitcoin or Litecoin, users who can send in any crypto asset and have it instantly processed. To make matters more difficult, you need a user who can send in $1 million, $5 million, our largest order we processed is $41 million, and have that processed instantly. Because the way a user thinks is, hey, I'm sending money. A user isn't thinking, oh, I'm doing a big OTC trade. That's not how a customer thinks. So you need to manage crypto fragmentation as challenge 1. Challenge 2 is fiat fragmentation. And so I alluded to this category really not being able to exist more than 12 months ago. And a lot of that is because even on the fiat side, when we work with Web 2 native businesses, the way we solve fiat fragmentation is by running everything on stablecoin rails under the hood. So even though there are Web 2 customers we serve, with Web 2 payment rails, there's no crypto anywhere. The only way you're able to offer and solve the fiat fragmentation challenge is by running those payments on crypto rails. And then going back to our first word here, statefulness, if you're a local fintech, all your users have the same payment method, it doesn't need to be that stateful. Everyone speaks the same language, and everyone has pretty darn similar patterns of transacting. But as soon as you have this massive fragmentation problem, the system needs to be very stateful and intelligent for what the user is actually going to do when they show up. So this is a screenshot from what a typical deposit flow might look like, where you have access to funds from a whole bunch of different categories. I said we dive into a little bit of the technical complexity on the crypto side. There's a whole bunch on this slide. You really only need to think about two things. First, if the user is going to send funds to this account, the first problem you have is actually picking up the transaction. Unlike a traditional, a user is broadcasting out a transaction, that's how most applications work. If you want a user to be able to send in any asset, you actually need to do the opposite. You need to pick up the transaction. Well, how do you pick up the transaction? We have millions of users. We support hundreds of different assets on a dozen different chains. So that means in every chain, if I send $1 million to this address, I want to know immediately my funds have been received. I don't want to send $1 million to the address and then it's just stale and it's not moving. That is very disconcerting. That is very stressful for a user. So how do you actually do that in practice? You need to take each block. Solana is the hardest to do this on because Solana has the most data. So you need to take each block and you need to deconstruct that block. And you need to say, in this block, is there one of hundreds of millions of unique events that I care about in real time to then begin actually processing that order? So that in and of itself is a big distributed systems problem. And then the second component is how you actually process the order once the funds come in. If I'm going to go do a multi-million-dollar USDT on Binance Smart Chain transaction over to Polygon or Base or Ethereum or Solana, imagine it's not just USDT, imagine it's something more complicated like Sol or ETH. That's something you typically go to a desk for. That's not something that's typically done in a typical user flow. And if you think about how on-chain markets work, in fact, how most all markets work, the larger your order, the worse your pricing is going to be. The deeper you're going to go into the book, the more slippage you're going to get. But that's not how a user thinks. A user thinks, I'm moving more money, I should get better pricing. So you need an entirely different engine in order to be able to process these deposits while still providing a good user experience and ensuring that your best users have the best experience. Those two big challenges to solve go into a very simple looking feature. Here's your address, send any token to this address, all assets are accepted, very simple and easy, but it's very hard to build behind the scenes. Conclusion, the emergence of global fintechs is far outside of crypto. Over the past few months, we've chatted with all sorts of different categories, beyond prediction markets, perp exchanges, traditional financial exchanges, savings apps, stablecoin savings apps, crypto native applications, payroll vendors. You guys could read all the categories on the slide. A whole bunch of local fintechs are now saying, hey, how can I 10x my total addressable market and go international? And often the limiting reagent to going international is not, hey, I'm in the United States and am I going to have product market fit in Canada or Europe? That's not the limiting reagent. It's not the product market fit. The limiting reagent is often the payment rails to actually access your local fintech. So if you need to settle in a brokerage, an FBO account, a clearinghouse in the United States, how do you actually move money from all those different regions back to that original account? Taking a step back, I personally am a big believer in capitalism and capital markets and believe that efficient capital markets have created more economic prosperity and more good globally, specifically in the West, places that have adopted capitalism very actively, than any other system. And when we bring open global financial markets and all these open global financial platforms and make them accessible to anyone, I think it's going to have a massive, unparalleled global effect on economic prosperity. That being said, thank you all for having me. Appreciate it.